I want to start this story by saying something that I think is important. Most of the time, when we notice something that makes us uncomfortable, there's a perfectly normal explanation. A noise in the walls, a car that looks familiar, a face you think you've seen before. Most of the time, it's nothing. I used to believe that. I used to be the kind of person who laughed off the idea that something bad could happen to me. Not in an arrogant way, just in the way that most people go through life assuming the worst things happen to other people in other towns and other neighborhoods. I live in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I work as a project manager for a logistics company. I was 31 years old when this happened. I own a gray Honda Accord. I keep my curtains open because I like natural light. And for 47 nights, someone sat outside my house and watched me. It started with the Ring camera. My neighbor across the street, a retired guy named Dennis, who tends to his lawn like it's a religion, had been complaining for months about a car that was parking in front of his mailbox. Not in front of my house, but in front of his. He couldn't pull out of his driveway without swinging wide, and after the third time he'd left a note on the windshield with no response, he decided to start documenting it. He set up a Ring camera on his porch, aimed at the street. We weren't close, Dennis and I. We waved at each other, sometimes chatted about the weather. But one Saturday morning in March, he knocked on my door and asked if I had a minute. I remember thinking it was about the lawn. I'd been meaning to edge the strip between our properties and hadn't gotten to it. I opened the door expecting a polite complaint. Instead, he held up his phone and said, "Is this someone you know?" The footage was from his Ring app. Nighttime. The timestamp said 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, 2 nights before. The street was empty except for a car parked against the curb, directly in front of my house. It was a dark blue or black sedan. Older model. The image wasn't clear enough to read the plates. The car was just sitting there, engine off. No visible movement inside. I told Dennis I didn't recognize it. He scrolled to another clip. Different night, same car, same spot, same time, just after 11. He had 7 clips in the last 2 weeks. I laughed it off. Probably someone visiting a neighbor. Parking overflow from somewhere. I told Dennis I appreciated him showing me and went back inside. I didn't think about it again for almost 2 weeks. Here's the thing about my life at that time. I was boring, and I mean that in the best possible way. I had a routine, and I loved my routine. I left for work at 7:45 every morning. I stopped at the same Dunkin' on the way. I was home by 6:15 most evenings. I cooked dinner, watched something on Netflix, and was in bed by 11. On weekends, I ran a 4-mile loop through the neighborhood, went to the grocery store, and occasionally drove out to see my parents. I tell you this because routines are a gift to someone watching you. A routine means they know exactly when to arrive, when you'll be home, when your lights will go off, when the street will be quiet. I didn't know any of this in March. I was just a person with a boring life who forgot about a car. Until my coworker, Priya, mentioned something at lunch. We were eating in the break room and somehow got on to the topic of home security. Someone else in the office had been broken into, and Priya mentioned she'd started checking her Ring footage every morning just to feel better. "You should do it too," she said. "Even if nothing's happening, it's kind of oddly satisfying, like checking your email but for your house." I laughed and said I'd think about it. That night, for no particular reason, I pulled up the app on my phone. I want you to understand what I saw. My camera faces the street. It has a pretty wide field of view. You can see from almost my driveway to the edge of Dennis's property. The footage is stored in a rolling window. I had about 3 weeks of clips. I started scrolling through, and there it was, the same dark sedan, parked in front of my house, 11:40, 11:52, 11:38. The times varied slightly, but never by more than half an hour. Always after 11, always gone by morning. I counted the clips. In the past 3 weeks, that car had been parked outside my house 19 times. I'm a rational person, I pride myself on that, and so I spent about 2 days constructing increasingly elaborate explanations for what I was seeing. It was a rideshare driver waiting between trips. It was someone who worked late shifts nearby and liked to decompress before going home to a difficult family situation. It was a kid who didn't want to face their parents. It was someone with insomnia who drove around at night. I chose to believe the explanations that required nothing of me. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about situations like this. There's a very specific social fear that kicks in. It's the fear of being wrong, of calling the police over a car and having it turn out to be your neighbor's visiting college kid, of telling people you're scared and having them look at you like you're paranoid, of trusting your gut and being embarrassed by it. That fear is very powerful. I went a full week without doing anything. I checked the footage every morning, and every morning the car had been there the night before. And every morning I added a new explanation to my mental list and went to work. On a Thursday night in late March, I happened to be standing at my kitchen window getting a glass of water at around midnight when I saw the headlights turn off. I knew it immediately. Something in my body registered it before my brain caught up. The way the car slid into the spot. The engine cutting out. No one getting out, just stillness. I stood there in my dark kitchen, not moving, watching a car full of shadows sit in front of my house. After about 10 minutes, I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I went back through my entire Ring footage the next morning. The app only keeps 30 days. But I had 30 days, and I went through every single night. I want to tell you what I found. In 30 days of footage, that car had been parked outside my house 29 times. 29 out of 30 nights. The one night it wasn't there, I had gone to visit my parents for the weekend and hadn't come home until Sunday. I looked at the footage from my parents' security camera on their outdoor light. It's old and grainy and only covers their driveway. But in the background, out on the street, just barely visible, there was a dark sedan. I called my friend Marcus that morning. Marcus is a lawyer, not a cop. But he's the kind of person who stays calm in emergencies and knows what to ask. I screen recorded the footage while I talked to him. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause on his line. "You need to call the police today," he said. "Not tomorrow. Today." The officer who came to my house was a woman named Sergeant Delgado. She sat at my kitchen table and watched the footage I showed her. She didn't say much while she watched. When it was over, she asked me a series of questions I wasn't prepared for. Did I have an ex-partner? A former roommate? Anyone I'd ended a friendship with badly in the last year? A co-worker I'd had conflict with? A neighbor dispute? Had I sold anything online recently? Had I been on any dating apps? I said yes to the dating app question. I'd used one, briefly, maybe 4 or 5 months before, gone on a handful of dates, nothing serious, deleted the account when I started feeling overwhelmed by it. She asked if any of those interactions had ended badly or felt off. I thought about it. There was one. A man I'll call Nathan. We'd matched, texted for about a week, gone on one date. He seemed normal at first. Well-spoken, good job, easy to talk to. But something felt slightly off. during the date. Hard to articulate. He asked a lot of specific questions. Where did I usually eat dinner? Did I live alone? What time did I usually get home from work? I remember thinking he was just making conversation but feeling vaguely strange about it. I didn't respond to his next message. He sent 2 more, then nothing. I thought it was over. Sergeant Delgado took down his name and asked if I still had the messages. I did. I sent them to her. What they don't show you in movies and crime shows is the part where you just wait. Delgado told me they would look into it. She told me to keep documenting. She told me not to approach the car, not to acknowledge it in any way, and to call them immediately if I ever felt in immediate danger. She gave me a case number, and then she left, and the car came back that night. I lay in my bed listening to the silence of my street, and I thought about what it meant that someone had been watching me for over a month, had learned my schedule, had followed me to my parents' house, had sat outside in the dark long enough to count my lights, going out room by room. I thought about how many times I'd stood at that kitchen window with the light on, how many times I'd pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a minute, scrolling my phone before going inside. How many times I'd been completely visible and had no idea. I started sleeping with the lights on. I put a chair under my front door handle. I moved my bedroom to the back of the house, the room I used as an office, and started sleeping on an air mattress in there. I put a kitchen knife in the nightstand. I want to be careful here because I know what some of you are thinking. Why didn't you stay somewhere else? Why didn't you go to your parents? And the honest answer is, I was ashamed. I know how that sounds. But I kept thinking that if I told my parents, I'd have to explain it. And to explain it meant saying out loud that someone had been watching me for almost 2 months, and I hadn't done anything sooner. That I'd explained it away. That I'd chosen the comfortable story over the true one. And I couldn't do that yet. So I stayed in my house with a chair under the door and tried to sleep. 11 days after I filed the report, Delgado called me. She said they'd identified the vehicle, a 2009 Honda Civic, registered to a man in a town about 40 minutes from mine. They had spoken with him. She said it wasn't Nathan. I remember sitting down when she told me that, just going completely still. He was a man I had never heard of. 44 years old. He had no prior criminal record. He had not matched with me on a dating app. He had, as far as anyone could determine, no prior connection to me whatsoever. He said he drove past my house once and saw me in the window. Delgado was measured in how she told me this. But she said he'd been cooperative. That he'd said in the interview that he hadn't intended to scare me, that he was sorry. That he didn't know what he was doing was a crime. They charged him with criminal stalking under Ohio law. He was issued a protection order. He was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of my house, my workplace, or my parents' address, which meant, she confirmed, that he had indeed been at my parents' house. I asked her how many times they thought he'd been outside my house in total. She said based on the interview, his estimate, and the footage, we had approximately 47 nights. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. The legal process was almost anticlimactic. He accepted a plea. He completed a mandated evaluation. He had no further contact with me. As far as I know, nothing like this had ever been part of his history before, and nothing like it has been reported since. The therapist I started seeing, and yes, I started seeing a therapist I recommended. She told me that what he described is actually a documented psychological pattern. She wasn't excusing it, she was just explaining it. That some people convince themselves that observation isn't harm, that watching isn't doing, that the line between interest and obsession is blurry when you're standing on the wrong side of it. She also told me something I keep coming back to. She said, you knew, you just didn't trust yourself yet. And she was right. I knew. Standing at that kitchen window, watching the headlights cut off, my body knew before my brain finished forming the thought. I spent 2 weeks arguing myself out of what I already felt. I don't do that anymore.